Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Mac and Jack Sports Show on the Wednesday edition of our show that covers all your Northeastern local professional sports, New York, Boston, Philly. We're on Wednesday through Sunday, 8 to 10 a.m. You can see us live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. You can find us at our username at MacMan62. We also have an Instagram account that you can check out, a Twitter page at MacManMcGrath, and our website is macandjacksports.com. The name of the website is Mac Sports Insiders. Like, follow, share, and subscribe where you can to help us keep growing. I'm Mac with my co-host Jack Hirsch, legendary boxing writer and former president of the Boxing Writers Association, and the show's historian gatekeeper. How you doing today, Jack?
Hey, good, Mac. How you doing?
I'm doing really good, Jack. Today on our show, in fact, we got a busy week coming up, Jack. Today on our show, we have the Philly sports guy. We also have the busy and great sports broadcaster of the Giants, Lance Meadow. On Thursday, we'll be having our Thanksgiving show. So anybody out there that that gets up early and wants to tune into a great Thanksgiving show, we'll have that. We'll have on the show our boxing expert, Iceman John Scully. We'll also have our two NFL analysts that join us on Friday, Keith Angle of TGI Sports Talk, and our friend and guest Byron Williams, who is our NFL analyst, former Giants wide receiver and Eagles wide receiver. And to finish it off on Friday, both those guests will be back. Saturday, we'll have Dr. Paul Semendinger, who runs the popular Yankee blog, Start Spreading the News. He'll join us for our debate show. And on Sunday, we'll have our big football show for the Sunday games, where we'll have on our fantasy football expert, Anthony Servino, and also a pretty popular sportscaster in his own right, Robert Butler from Sportscope. So we got a great week of guests, Jack. We have some great shows coming up, and it's going to be a lot of fun. And remember, folks, tune in Thursday for our Thanksgiving show.
That's a lot of good stuff, Mac. I mean, we're getting it done here. I mean, this is a lot of good stuff.
Yes.
I'm even looking forward to it, and I'm part of it. I mean, I might be quiet and just listen. I mean,
yes, a lot of knowledge, a lot of fun we're going to be having this week. And we're going to get to the sports update. I'm not going to spend too long on it, Jack, but the sports update is brought to you by Fanatics. And if you want to get the clothing of your favorite teams, jerseys, hats, all gear, we have the place for you. Fanatics, just go to the Mac and Jack website, macandjacksports.com. It's called Mac's Sports Insider. Click on their link. It brings you right to their store just in time for Christmas. Order for your special someone's birthday, or just treat yourself to your favorite team's clothing and gear. That's macandjacksports.com. Website, Mac's Sports Insiders. Click on the Fanatics link for all your team's clothing and gear.
Mac, myself and my wife, we each got Yankee caps yesterday. We went to the site and we ordered Yankee caps.
Excellent. I mean, that's a great store, Jack. It has everything, all teams, all sports. So if you're in the mood for a Christmas gift, I mean, that's the place that I'm going to. So many updates, Jack. College football came out with their first power rankings. I'm not a huge fan of rankings because they'll change a lot, and the way they figure out the rankings sometime I think is unfair, but I'm going to give them to you anyway. We got Alabama number 1, Notre Dame number 2, Clemson number 3, and Ohio State number 4, Jack.
Mac, these power rankings are the same as saying weather's permanent. I mean, it changes week to week. Weather changes day to day. These power rankings, they change week to week. And the national playoff determines everything at the end of the day. And it's nice. It's interesting. They do the same with the NFL. They rate, number 1 on down. And it's a fun thing to do at that moment, but put it in perspective because it'll change over the course of one game.
Oh, definitely, and you know we've seen where, for an example, Notre Dame, who was ranked in the top four before, go up against the number one team and get blown out. So I mean, it's hard to see, you know, certain teams that we're not sure of, especially the teams like a smaller team that hasn't been there in a while. BYU comes to mind right away. I mean, they're playing great ball against the teams they're playing against. But when they go up against Ohio State or something like that, who is a great program, they normally run into a buzzsaw, Jack.
I think Notre Dame is the sentimental favorite because of the tradition and everything. So I think the average person who doesn't care, who has nothing at stake as far as the school goes, they're kind of pulling for Notre Dame, I think.
Sure. I mean, Notre Dame at one time had the biggest following in the country in all sports. I think they used to call it Subway or something like that. Notre Dame fans that would follow them just because they were the Fighting Irish. So we have Kelly Oubre Jr. taking a shot at his former owner and the previous owner of the Phoenix Suns, and I think it's Albert Sarver, if I'm saying it right, Jack, saying he can now play for an owner who really cares about the organization. And I just don't like that, Jack. I mean, just be professional.
No, I mean, when players move on, leave it alone. It's like a breakup in a relationship. You know, you just move on. And, you know, the players do the same thing with coaches a lot of times. They get a new coach and they say, oh, with this coach, it's so good in this way and that way. And just really leave it alone. I mean,
Who cares, right? I mean, you're on a new team now. Play who you're playing with, and why take shots at somebody? I mean, I don't get that. Tommy Lasorda is hospitalized and seems to be showing signs of improvement, Jack. Of course, Tommy Lasorda, the manager of the Dodgers, a good manager. I mean, he took the Dodgers to the World Series a few times.
Tommy Lasorda, funny guy, one of the great characters of the game. He even once went to the ballpark with a couple of his players. They took a cab in, but they came after the scheduled time that the team was supposed to arrive. So he fined both of his players. And they said, Tommy, but we traveled with you. How could you fine us? He said, you should know to hang out with someone more dependable. Okay?
That sounds about right.
That sounds right. Yeah.
Sounds right, Tommy. So we also got the Hall of Fame, the list of Hall of Fame inductees, Jack. A few locals up in there, but I'll go through the list real quick. We have the Eagles' Eric Allen, cornerback who played with the Eagles. We have Calvin Johnson. I mean, I can't see him not getting in. Rondé Barber, who was a great defensive back for Tampa Bay. You got Richard Seymour normally for the most part of his career played for the Patriots. You got Hines Ward, the great receiver from Pittsburgh. And let's see, we also got John Lynch, also the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yeah.
Safety. Clay Matthews from the Cleveland Browns. That's a
great class. Great class.
Steve Tasker from the Bills, along with their linebacker. His name escapes me right now, Jack. Number 97. I can see him. I can see his name.
Darryl Talley?
No, not Darryl Talley. That was 56, the outside linebacker, Jack, for the Bills. Number 97, who was on the Super Bowl teams. It'll come to me in a few minutes. Too. But you got a couple of Buffalo
Steve Tasker, special teams player.
Yeah, and a wide receiver, but mainly
known for special teams.
Yes,
yeah.
You got Reggie Wayne from the Colts, great receiver.
Wow, what a class! That is a powerful class.
Rodney Harrison, the defensive back.
Rodney Harrison, a bunch of those guys at the very least are borderline Hall of Famers. Like you mentioned, Calvin Johnson in the beginning. He normally would be a no-brainer, but did he play long enough?
Yes,
That's the only question. Did he put in the time?
Yeah, I mean, Megatron at his best in his prime, there's nobody better, Jack. So he might get it just because of that. And of course, we got Peyton Manning, and if he's not a first ballot Hall of Famer, I don't know.
Manning, Stacey, of course. Rondé Barber, I believe, is a Hall of Famer. Great player for the Buccaneers. Clay Matthews. outstanding. I mean, it's you have a number of guys in there, really a
Yeah,
number of them that you can't argue about if they went in.
definitely. I agree with that 100%. So let's get to the standings, Jack, before we get to the Philly guy who's scheduled to come in at 8:30. In the AFC West, the Chiefs squeezed by the Raiders 35-31, still have only one loss. The Raiders, with that loss, are in second, and I still think they're playoff bound, followed by the young competitive Broncos and Chargers, who both had big wins, Jack. So, again, Chiefs, the class of the AFC, I still think, but the Raiders aren't too far behind.
I'm not that sure that they're that close to the Chiefs. I get the feeling everything the Chiefs are doing now is geared towards the playoffs. I think their foot's not going to go on the accelerator all out till they get to the playoffs. They wanted to beat the Raiders to kind of avenge their earlier loss. It was a very tight game that went down to the wire. But I get the feeling the Chiefs are the type of team that could just turn it up a little notch come playoff time. Even
Yeah,
at 9-1, I think their better days might be set to come. That doesn't mean they're not going to lose a game or two more before the season's out. They might finish up 13-3, lose two more games, but it doesn't mean there's going to be a reason for concern.
yeah, I definitely agree with that. The Steelers, though, are still unbeaten at 10-0, Jack. They easily beat the Jaguars. The Browns beat the sinking Eagles. The Ravens now with two losses in a row slide into third, and the Bengals now minus Joe Burrows are at 2-7, Jack. I still don't think the Browns will compete for a Super Bowl, but Cleveland has to be happy to have a winning team this year. It's been a long time since they've had one. So
Well, they're happy that Baker Mayfield doesn't have to throw the ball with that running game.
that's very true.
With Nick
Very
Chubb
true.
and Kareem Hunt. But at some point, Baker Mayfield will. He's going to have to air it out because teams are going to key on Cleveland's ground game more and more. And especially you get into the playoffs, Baker Mayfield's going to have to make some plays.
Definitely. And I don't know, Jack. I don't know if the Steelers or I think it's the Steelers and the Chiefs this year. I think those are the two teams that will be in a championship. That's the way it looks right now, but we'll see. In the AFC South, Jack, the Colts and Titans are tied at 7-3, both with big wins. The Texans upset the Pats, if you want to call that an upset, and the Jags have now lost 9 in a row, Jack.
Well, the Jags, they have one win on the year. The Jets have none. It's coming down right between the Jags and the Jets. Who's going to get the number one draft choice? Probably Trevor Lawrence. And that's where the attention's going to lie. It's amazing. We look towards the top of the standings, the positions, who's going to play who in the playoffs. But we look towards the bottom of the standings, too. Who's going to get the coveted number one pick?
Right.
So the way the Jets are going right now, the Jets might win a game or two more, but I think Jacksonville is a little better than the Jets. They're more likely to win a couple of games before the year's over.
Definitely agree with that. We're going to keep up with the standings, Jack. In the NFC East, the Eagles continue their slide, now only have a half a game lead over the Giants, Washington, and Dallas. It's anyone's division to win, Jack.
I'm getting tired of this Carson Wentz talk. But what I'm getting tired of is people saying, well, Jalen Hurts wouldn't be ready to go in if needed. Why wouldn't he be ready?
Right.
The Eagles were well into the season now. Other first-year quarterbacks have played substantially. Justin Herbert was put in on short notice when Tyrod Taylor had to go out. Short notice, and he's adapted well. Tua Tagovailoa, he sat on the bench, but they started him. He started playing. I don't want to hear Jalen Hurts is not ready. Tell me Jalen Hurts isn't good enough to assume the starting position, and I'll understand, okay? I wouldn't agree with it, but they took him in the second round overall. He was a successful quarterback in college, a very successful one. He led Alabama to a national championship. Then after that, nearly won the Heisman. He's as ready as any rookie's going to be. So, Either you're sticking with Carson Wentz all the way Doug Peterson has indicated, or you have to make a move at some point. I think Doug Peterson has to be tired, the Eagles coach, of all these questions. At some point, I have to feel he's going to go to Jalen Hurts just to give the team a spark or something. He's got to shake it up a bit because Carson Wentz really he was awful.
Yeah,
Last game against Cleveland.
he looks like he's either lost confidence or something. You do have the Dallas Cowboys with the easiest schedule left. Of course, they'll be playing Washington Thanksgiving. Washington's playing some very competitive ball. The Giants seem to be playing the best in that division right now. But Washington and the Giants have a very tough schedule ahead of them, Jack. So I'm not sure what's going to happen if you just go off strength of schedule. Dalton coming back, Dallas might squeak out that division, Jack.
Mac, I mean, I talk about it like anyone else, strength of schedule. But for the most part, it's talk because you never know. Going into last week, the team with the easiest schedule in the NFL, the team rated with the easiest schedule was the Miami Dolphins. And the Miami Dolphins played the Denver Broncos, basically a losing team. They played them last week and they lost.
Right.
So the team with the easiest schedule lost last week. So I don't want to hear like what a big advantage it necessarily is. You can judge a schedule week to week. And as far as the Giants having a tough schedule, they don't have one this week because they're playing the Cincinnati Bengals. So it's a game they not only should win, it's a must game for them because if you can't beat Cincinnati, you can't expect to make a serious run at winning the division.
That's very true. The NFC North, and I didn't forget about the AFC East, Jack. We'll get to that as soon as we get done with the NFC because I want to talk a little bit more about that. In the NFC North, Green Bay with a tough loss to the Colts. They fall with 7-3, but still 2 games ahead of the falling Bears, and the inconsistent Vikings and Lions are tied for last, Jack.
The Vikings missed out on a golden opportunity. I think they're through as far as making the playoffs, losing to the Dallas Cowboys at home. At home, they lose to the Dallas Cowboys, the way the Cowboys have been playing. And now tell me, well, the Cowboys look good against the Steelers the week before. Cowboys hadn't won a game in a while. Vikings should have taken care of business. They should have been 5-5 now and ready to make a playoff push. They're 4-6, and they took a step backwards, and then last place in that division. They're tied with the Lions.
Right.
Ooh, that's a story in itself, the Lions. But it's just a terrible loss by the Vikings to lose to Dallas.
I definitely agree with that. In the NFC South, the Saints, without Drew Brees, keep rolling. They're 8-2, best record in the NFC right now, Jack. The Bucs lose Monday night to the Rams. The Panthers, with a big win, moved to 4-6, and the Falcons, who looked like they were going to make a move, got slapped back down. I don't know really what to think of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Everybody keeps saying, "Oh, they're going to be good by the end of the year." The coach comes out, calls out Brady. He ends up, saying he can't throw the ball long. He's confused in the reads, saying all this stuff, and it kind of makes me think, Jack, maybe Winston's interceptions last year were not all his fault. Maybe it's the scheme. Maybe they try to push the ball down the field too much instead of taking those crossing patterns and those timing patterns, Jack. I mean, Brady's been intercepted more this year than he has in one season than he has in a long time.
Mac, I was in Tampa Bay last year, and I attended the game at Raymond James Stadium when the Tampa Bay Buccaneers played the Houston Texans. It was Jameis Winston's fault. He starts the game with a pick six. He ends the game with a pick six. He's shown awful judgment. It was Jameis Winston's fault, the interceptions during the time he played with Tampa Bay. He'd be brilliant at times outside of the interceptions, but he was a turnover machine. Tom Brady wasn't that bad, okay, Monday night against the Rams. He was quite average. Leonard Fournette dropped 3 balls that were thrown to him out of the backfield. He hit Antonio Brown on a long pass that Antonio Brown couldn't hold on to. But there were the bad throws besides, where he overthrew receivers. If I had to give him a grade, I'd give him a C. Okay?
Right.
Not for Tom Brady, for anyone else. If I didn't know who the quarterback was, Tom Brady's grade would have been given a C. But when you talk about an all-time great quarterback and the expectations you have from Tom Brady, you can't be average, because average means you failed. That's bad. And he was quite average in that game. But one trend about Tampa Bay that's been interesting this year, whenever they have a very disappointing game and a loss, they bounce back big the next week. And
Yeah.
the team they're going to have to bounce back against this week is the Kansas City Chiefs. So
Right.
this is going to tell us an awful lot about where Tampa, stands going into the playoffs. And they're not even guaranteed of making the playoffs. They still
Yeah.
got a little work to do. That's 7-4. They should get there. But, let's see what happens Sunday.
I wanted to save the AFC East for last, Jack. Very interesting, a couple moves made. Of course, the Bills were on their bye week, and they move up a half a game because, Miami lost and the Pats lost and the Jets lost. Miami, they're going with Tua. They pull him out and then put Fitzpatrick in. I don't know who that helped there. I don't know. It sure didn't help Tua. Miami didn't come back and win the game. In fact, what it maybe did to Tua was kind of make him look over his shoulder now. I remember when Eli Manning took over for the great Kurt Warner, a Hall of Famer, and the Giants at that time were 5-4, and they decided to put Eli in. Let's see what this kid can do. And they told Kurt Warner, if he has any problems, we're going to go back to you. And Kurt Warner said, "No, you're not. I'm not going to do that. This is now Eli's team, win or lose. This is how he's going to learn." And then within a few years, the Giants were in the Super Bowl. Now, to me, what are you doing? You put in this quarterback that's supposed to be your franchise quarterback, and because he's having a bad game, you pull him. I don't get it.
Mac, have you been listening to me on past shows? You and, Byron Williams. Both you and Byron Williams owe me apologies. You guys were laughing at me. Brian Flores, the Dolphin coach, did exactly what I said all NFL coaches should do. You want to know why he did it? Because he's smart. He's a great young coach. For all we know, he was listening to this show and got the idea, what I said. You should have relief pitchers, kind of like quarterbacks coming in and out. When your starter can't get it going, no matter who he is, no matter how great he is, you put in the next man if he can rally you. They had the ultimate relief pitcher in their bullpen, and Ryan Fitzpatrick, the perfect guy. Tua was struggling. If Tua's confidence is that fragile that he's now lost it and he's not going to be effective going forward, that means he was never going to be that. Come on. These quarterbacks are strong-minded. He took them out. Ryan Fitzpatrick rallied the team. They nearly won the game. They didn't. But guess what? He's coming back with Tua to start next week the way he should. And if Tua doesn't get it going in the next game, in comes Fitzpatrick again to see if he can rally the team. If it were up to you, Mac, you would keep Jacob deGrom and Garrett Cole in the games till the bitter end. Even if they didn't have their stuff that game, they're getting hit. No, they got to go 9 innings. Because if I come to the mound and take them out, they might lose their confidence. You don't want to mess with their fragile confidence. No.
Jack,
okay? Brian Flores knows what he's doing. That's why the Dolphins are an up-and-coming team that's going to be a force for years to come.
Name one team that has successfully done that, not barring injury, one team that has had a relief, as you call them, relief quarterback come in to relieve a starting quarterback that's having a bad day and has gone on to win a Super Bowl.
None, because these coaches aren't innovative. They don't understand what's going on. In the future, quarterbacks are going to be shuttled in and out like other players.
I
They're
don't.
not innovative. The same way in baseball, I just mentioned years ago, starting pitchers were expected to try to pitch the whole game. Relief pitchers, managers were reluctant to bring in the game altogether. The game has changed. Brian Flores is innovative. He understands his starter didn't have it going at all. Didn't have it going at all and had to come out. Okay? The guy on the bench is ready to give you a jolt as long as the guy on the bench is very capable. Not
Oh,
all
Jack,
backups are good enough
Jack,
to come in with.
Jack, tell that to the Tampa Bay fans right now when their ace got pulled out and they got beat. When Snell got pulled out of the game for a relief pitcher and they got their butts whooped. You tell that to all the Tampa
Snell
Bay.
was going good. I agree.
Oh
The
my
guy is
God.
going
Listen,
good.
Jack,
You don't take him out of the game. But if your starter's struggling, he doesn't have it going at all, and you have a very capable guy who could rally you off the bench, you get him in there. And let me tell you, if Fitzpatrick wasn't playing well when he relieved Tua, then you bring Tua back again.
Why don't you bring in the third string? Jack, why don't you bring in the third string quarterback? Because Tua can't do it and Fitzpatrick can't do it. Why don't you put it in the
But
third?
the third string quarterback
Oh,
has to be capable. If Josh Rosen was still with Miami as a third string quarterback and Fitzpatrick wasn't getting it done, yeah, I would have brought in
oh,
Josh
jeez.
Rosen, a
Oh,
guy
my
with some
God,
NFL experience. Yeah,
Jack,
I would have
I,
in that spot.
I could tell you never played the game at all, Jack. You
Brian
never
Flores
ever.
knows more football than you, and he agreed with me, right?
Well,
So you can say that.
I'll tell you.
Brian Flores is representing me.
I'll tell you,
That's
Jack.
who represents
Brian
me.
Flores made a huge mistake Sunday, taking out his starting franchise quarterback to put in Ryan Fitzpatrick, and now the kid's going to be looking over his shoulder every time he makes a mistake. He's going to be looking at the bench to see if Ryan Fitzpatrick comes in, and I think Flores made a huge mistake. Backstage right now, Jack, we got a newer guest, but one of my favorite guests is the Philly sports guy. His last name I have a problem with, so maybe he can help me out when I bring him on. It's Jamie, and I think it's Paglia. I'm taking a shot. I know it's wrong, but when I bring him on, he'll straighten me out. He's going to talk to us about some Philadelphia Eagles and some Philadelphia 76ers news because they had a draft and they also had some free agency. Very popular on all his social sites. So let's bring him up. Let's bring up Jamie here. How you doing today, Philly sports guy Jamie P? I think I'm going to call you. I'm not sure.
Yeah, people usually call me Pags because they can't get that last name right. It's actually pronounced Paye, like Yippee-I-O, Paye.
Yeah, there you go.
So, I just thought of something with Philly sports. I don't know why it popped into my head. If you talk about the most iconic Philly teams of all time, I'm just guessing off the top of my head. I'd say the Philadelphia Flyers under Freddie Shero, the Broad Street Bullies. I mean, if you had to rate one of the sports, one of the teams as number one, like on a pound-for-pound list, I think it was the Philadelphia Flyers. I don't know why they popped into my head, and it's...
And I tell you, that's what started my fandom. My mother, my grandmother, my aunt, my uncle all worked at the Spectrum back in the day. So I grew up at the Spectrum. And hockey was such a different game back then. The athletes were so different. They would have some of the players like Jimmy and Joe Watson, a couple of defensemen, brothers that played on that team. They would come over to my house with their kids. We would play down the basement and they would be playing pinochle upstairs. So it was a much different world back then. Ed Snyder knew me by name because I happened to be around a lot. Not because I was, just because I was like kind of part of the team. I celebrated Christmases with them. I knew a lot of the players. And then as I grew older, I started to work at the Spectrum as well. I got to be firsthand on a first name basis with a lot of these players. So it's amazing kind of how you kind of grow up. I learned how to read in the Inquirer and Bulletin because I wanted to read the box scores of the Flyers games.
Wow, that's That's a
Could
great.
Dave Schultz play at all, or was he just good for fighting?
Oh,
Could
he scored a
play?
couple of goals. He scored a
Yeah,
couple of goals. Yeah, he was never known, but he had a great wrist shot and a great slap shot. It was always the fighting that he was known most for.
guys, I would try to watch him play the New York Rangers on TV, and I'd see about 3 minutes of hockey, 17 minutes of fighting.
Yeah,
It was a lot. Well, they hated each other. They
Yeah.
hated each other back then. It was,
Go ahead.
again, the sport was so much different that rivalries really were rivalries. They
Yeah.
didn't like each other. They didn't trade with each other.
right.
Because
Yeah. They didn't go free agency from one team to another either,
Yeah.
especially if they were rivals. Jack, that's a good team to put up there. But I'll tell you, I take the Moses Malone, Dr. J basketball team championship up
the
against
faux championship. I tell you that it really is a tough one to kind of choose between them, because really you could put the 1980 Phillies in that mix too, because of the way that they played. It was just that was a great team, and they were kind of very well constructed, and Pete Rose was the cherry on the top that got them over.
Guys, we'll end the argument by settling on the 1960 Philadelphia Eagles case.
I knew he was going there.
That's how we'll settle it. We'll compromise.
I knew he's going.
And that's a little before my time.
Yeah.
So I've watched the game, and I've watched a lot of history when it comes to just Chuck Bednarik and those guys playing and that. And everybody seems to forget that Chuck
Bednarik, the toughest athlete maybe ever, just about, for pure toughness.
Wasn't he a two-way player, guys? Didn't he play center and middle linebacker? Am I saying it right?
That is correct. That is correct. He played 57 minutes a game.
Guys, what bothered me? I'm listening to the Michael Kay show before the last Giant Eagle game, and I usually like those guys listening. They're naming the 5 greatest moments in Eagle Giant history, okay? And they don't mention the hit on Chuck Bednarik on Frank Gifford. I don't mean it was great, memorable. That's what I mean, whether he's standing over him. And Pat Summerall thought when they had an ambulance that Frank Gifford had actually died. That's how bad it was. They put Frank Gifford out for a year, and Frank Gifford always hated to talk about it, saying it was off balance. It's not part of the game. He wouldn't sign the picture, his autograph on it. Not that I blame him at all for that.
Right.
But it was really, really memorable. And with Chuck Bednarik, the last play of the 1960 championship game against the Packers. I forgot the Packer player he was lying on top of, but the seconds are ticking off and there's no timeouts left for the Packers to stop the clock. And Bednarik isn't getting up, just lying on him to hold him down. And then as soon as the final second goes off, he says, "You can get up now. This bleeping game is over."
Yep. I know that just as well as you do. You did a really good rendition of that.
Yeah.
And you see why he's our historian gatekeeper on our show. He could just
I'm missing trivia questions. Philly man can help me with the trivia questions.
Definitely.
Do that.
So what we're gonna do is we're gonna even though it might hurt you a little bit, Jamie,
I know.
We're gonna take a quick follow up and maybe put this to bed with the Eagles with their loss last week. I watched some of your videos. I check all the guests, whether they do videos or whether they have functions they're doing. I saw you outside the bar and you were just getting upset and I was upset last week, even though I'm not an Eagle fan, believe it or not, because I love football. The Eagles again refuse to make a commitment to the run, even when they're running well. They decide that we're going to run, we're going to stop running, we're going to start passing, we're not even going to come back to the run. We're just going to go ahead and just keep throwing the ball down the field. And when it's not even working, and I still, I know Carson Wentz didn't play well last week. I gotta state that as a fact. He didn't. But I also know that, a lot of things in offense has to do with a system and calling the plays. And when you're running the ball well, and you don't continue to run the ball well, as the Titans have shown people for the last 2 years, when you're running that ball well, I don't know why you turn away from it and don't go back to it.
I wish I could answer that question with any bit of intelligence. I am just frustrated to no end that I was screaming at the camera, run the ball, run the ball. That pick six should have been a run play without a doubt in my mind. And it was an open run play. The guy would have gone for 8 yards. It was so amazing to me that he continues to not use these players properly. And so we run all eight rushes in a row. He fumbles. Obviously, it's wet, and the guy puts a helmet on the ball. Guy makes a good play, and they get stopped at the 5-yard line, and then they drive all the way back, and they get stopped at the 1-yard line. So now we've just spent a lot of football running the ball, and now all of a sudden we're going to stop running the ball and just go with the pass. And it just amazed me that he could not go back to running the ball. And then it felt like to me that when he would go to try to run the ball, that he was choosing run plays that they were going to stop, so that it was almost like he was coaching to the defense so that he could then make passing call. Like he could go back to the pass and say, well, hey, the rush stopped working. Well, the rushing stopped working because you stopped going to it in the way that it was working. Because every time we went around the corner, they would get 7-8 yards.
Yeah.
And it just, and third down calls, I don't understand them anymore either. It's like, since the fourth quarter of the Cowboys game, they've gone 2 for 23. 2 for 23. They went 0 for 9 against the Giants. They went 2 for 12 against Cleveland, and they were 0 for 2 in the fourth quarter against Dallas. So, I mean, it's like, it's at what point do you say, okay, maybe I'm just not making any sense anymore. Maybe it's time for me to stop. I'm not a Marty Morningweg fan. I think that it's time for him to go. I know that Deuce Staley is not the answer either. It's time for them to get a real offensive coordinator, that the offensive coordinator by committee is not working anymore. And it even goes on the other side of the ball as well, where I feel like that there's not enough checks and balances against Schwartz. That Schwartz he's like the supreme leader, defensive coordinator, half head coach, that he only coaches the defense. He doesn't really have, it's like, and it's a separate, Peterson's the offense, Schwartz is the defense. And I just don't believe it's working anymore. I think it's time for them both to have to really look in the mirror and start to really delegate a lot more, because I'm finding that this team is not responding the way that they should. And I was so angry that I felt that I gave much more of an effort than my team did. I get dressed up, I put the makeup on. You guys have seen that, and I'm amped up. They heard me out in Cleveland, and I was in Philly. So just because I know that I'm that loud, and it's to have the performance that's been happening. That's you got Alshon Jeffrey. I feel like that he should just sit out the rest of the season. I don't think he's done. I think it's definitely time for Jason Peters to step back and retire. I mean, and his game, it's a shame because he's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, and it's now his performance is starting to take away from that, and that frustrates me too. So,
well, Jamie, we got a comment from one of our listeners, Eric Gardner, saying Sanders was open and Wentz overthrew it, pick six. To him, it's that simple. I mean, Wentz just didn't do with what with the play. The guy was open, and then we have another listener saying he agrees with you, and I do agree with both. I mean, Wentz is having problems. I don't know if it's his confidence, as Jack says, that thinks that they don't have feelings, professional football players, I don't think. But I believe that there's two problems going in here. One, I agree with you. They need a real offensive coordinator. And I also think that they've got to run not up the middle. Their backs aren't built to be bruisers. They're quick. They got great moves. Scott and Sanders both off tackle. They're dynamite when they run them traps off tackle. They're dynamite. They pick up sometimes up to 20 yards a carry. I've seen them do it with my own eyes. So, I mean, to me, and I know Jack wants to get in here. I got to let him in.
No, I'm good. Yeah.
You can't. Number one, if you're going to run the ball, you don't take a guy that weighs 180 pounds and try and stuff it down somebody's throat. You run off tackle or outside, and two, you got to make a commitment. If you don't, then Wentz is going to be in a lot of problems as far as the pass rush goes and as far as the defensive backfield goes, because they know he's going to pass. It's that simple to me.
Yeah, but the truth of the matter is that our offensive line between the tackles is where we gain the most yards rushing. When they're not going back into pass protection and they're pushing forward, they create holes, and it's always 5 to 7 yards for the most part. It's like, so when it seems like that they know that the rush is coming, it's coming up the center, they'll get like 2 yards. But so one of the stats that I found out that I went back to take a look at is that out of the last 48 times that they carried the ball, they've only lost yardage on 5 plays to a total of 6 yards. That's it. So, I mean, and that's running the ball, whether you're going around the end or whether you're going up the center, whether they're stuffing it and such like that, that when you're only losing out of 48 plays, 5 plays for a total of 6 yards, and you gained over 250, 60 yards, obviously that's part of what's working with your offense. And the fact that your quarterback is struggling and you're going to continue to stick with him, you definitely need to make sure that he's like now. And I agree a little bit with Jack where, hey, sometimes you got to get pulled. You need to be sitting down and watching the game from the sidelines so that you could start to learn a little bit of the mistakes that you're making. And if you're getting paid a ton of money, if that doesn't stroke your ego enough, that you're getting paid millions of dollars and you get to have to sit back and watch somebody else do it for a minute. If you got too fragile an ego, you shouldn't be in the NFL, because there's a lot of people making a ton of money and there's a lot of people waiting to try to make that money and to be able to do a lot better than he's doing. So I'm a firm believer that I thought that they should have sat him down for a couple of drives. I thought maybe in the third quarter, after he went back out there and it didn't do much, he should have sat down, gave, and I've been a big Wentz supporter, but you got to see what's going on. I keep going back to, the movie The Replacements, which is such a funny movie with Keanu Reeves and the Washington Sentinels. But there were a few things in there that kind of just strike true. And I feel like Wentz is in quicksand. I feel like it doesn't matter what he does right now. It's just trying to, keep your head above. And he's not, he keeps sinking. And it's just time. I think it's time for him to just watch the game from the outside so that he could pick up some of the things that he's missing. And when he was hurt a couple of seasons ago, it was easier for him to do that. He could watch the game, see what was happening, and then go in and execute better. And I feel like it's got to happen now, or else it's just the season's going to continue going where I almost hate to say that I do believe that if it keeps going the way it does, that your Giants probably have the best chance of winning this division.
See, I'm at the point I feel Jalen Hurts should be given an opportunity. I don't mean to take over the position full time. Come in, see if he could give the team a spark for a couple of series. If he doesn't, put Carson Wentz back in. There's nothing a matter, especially with this Eagle team, to rotate the quarterbacks every couple of series if they're not being effective. I mean, what do you have to lose? Because Wentz isn't being effective as is. Even on the play where he was sacked for safety, I mean, he should have known to get rid of the ball. The instinct should have been better, and they weren't.
But Jack, they have brought Hurst in and them trick Wildcat formation.
That doesn't count. Come on.
I know it doesn't. So if they had any kind of confidence in him throwing the ball, because he has not thrown the ball out of the Wildcat yet, why wouldn't they do it then? I mean, if they want to put him in for a series or a series of plays, then why not let him throw from the Wildcat? They haven't done it. In fact, he's been stuffed. They've been stuffed every time they tried it. So right now it's telling me that the head coach of the Eagles has no faith in Hurts.
I agree. And I also believe that that somehow in the mix of this, that they are thinking about Nate Sudfeld. That they can't put Hurts in because Nate Sudfeld is really the number 2, even though he's not dressing, that they're only dressing 2 quarterbacks, that if they were going to start a second quarterback, that it would be Nate Sudfeld, just because he's been with us for so long, which also is mind blowing to me that they would even consider that thought process. but I believe that that's part of what's happening here. And that's the reason why that they are so afraid to pull him even for a couple of series.
Why
And
would they draft Jalen Hurts if he wasn't possibly the heir apparent? That doesn't make any sense.
You're
I
right.
mean, I look at him as the primary backup. He's dressing as the backup. And if Wentz should become inactive for any reason, I would think it would be Jalen Hurts' job, to step in.
I would think so too, but I feel I hear some rumblings as we talk about this, is that it would be Sudfeld's job as the number two quarterback, that they wouldn't give it to Hurts again, that he would still be the same role player that
Wow.
he is currently.
Wow.
And now I don't coach the team. I don't make any money, so I don't have reporters telling me what's going on.
Then that's a
So
wasted draft pick, a completely wasted draft pick, a
I
second round pick if that's the case.
I can't say with any assuredness that that's the case, but I'm thinking that has something to play here. And
Because Jimmy, why wouldn't they let Hurts throw? I mean, it doesn't make sense to me at all. So let's get on to the next game. Real tough one coming up Monday night.
We're going to give him a little NBA, right? I mean, we're going to talk a little
yeah,
Sixers match.
Listen, Jack, we're going to do this first, and then we'll move on to the 76ers. The next game that the Eagles are playing is against the Seattle Seahawks Monday night. Seattle is playing great ball. They have a very tough division out there compared to ours anyway. What can you see Monday night that the Eagles need to do or that can do to have a chance at beating Seattle?
Run the ball, keep the ball out of his hands. They got to keep the ball out of Russell Wilson's hands. Their defense is Swiss cheese, and you got to be able to hold the ball against this team. You cannot give him opportunity after opportunity. And that's where I feel like that. So the Eagles seem to play much better at night than during the day. I don't know if they just, they wake up tired or they like to, play video games at night. But at night, they're 3-0. During these day games, they're, 0-5-1 or
Didn't
0-6-1.
realize that. Yeah.
So, maybe the bright lights is, what makes this team shine a little bit. And I'm hoping that that's the case because Seattle has had our number for a little bit of time now. This is the fourth time in a row that they will be coming to Philadelphia. And they've beaten us all three times. Russell Wilson, I'll never forget this, that he called up Andy Reid and asked Andy Reid to step up and draft him, and that if he drafted him, they were going to win Super Bowls together. So since Seattle grabbed him 3 picks before, and we wound up with Foles, in that draft. So it's not like we got a Super Bowl as well, and we got as many Super Bowls as he does, but ultimately, Russell Wilson has always kind of held that chip on his shoulder. And now Metcalf is the same thing. He's got this, proverbial chip on his shoulder that he really doesn't need to have, but he's got it on there saying, hey, well, you didn't draft me, so I'm going to kill you every time. And it's, we have our guy who's a healthy scratch who got picked before him. So it makes it really challenging. This is going to be a really tough game for the Eagles to win. I never really pick against the Eagles. I'm going against my trend, and I think that the Eagles lose this game. And I think it's like a 31-17 game. I think that the Hawks actually just dominate and that the Eagles' woes continue.
Okay, all right. So as Jack mentioned, we're going to go ahead and get a little 76ers in with you. The draft just happened. Tyree Maxey, Isaiah Joe, Paul Reed, top 3 picks. What can you tell us about those 3 guys?
So Maxey was a surprise. And I needed to find out a little bit about him because I'm not a Kentucky fan. I don't like watching Kentucky. But so I watched his tape, and it seems like that kid can play once they get on the court against really good competition. I felt like that his competition, when they weren't playing a good enough team, that he kind of trailed off and lost a little bit of focus. But when they were up against really strong competition, that's when he came to play. And he's got really good off-the-ball skills. And I think that that's going to be really important, especially when you're putting Simmons at the point forward position, where you're going to be able to have him kind of run the ball a little bit, but you want somebody who can be able to be in a guard. I think they're going to probably put him as, as a point guard, but like an off the ball point guard, and he can seem to find his way open and make some of these shots, which is one of the things that really excited me. Isaiah Joe, they were going to try to choose him at the number 21 pick if Maxey wasn't there. They were that excited about him. So he was by far the best shooter in the draft. And there's not many players that have been able to score. I think he had 200 3-pointers, 100 assists, and 80 steals. There's only been 4 players in college history to be able to do that over 2 seasons, and he's one of them. So, and that's one of the things that I thought of was really going to be good. That's going to help the Sixers moving forward, obviously, because they revamped the whole team. The whole team's revamped. I say Paul Reed, I couldn't tell you much about him. I know that he was a later round pick. I know that they're really excited to bring him on. Second round picks really are hard to fight, to get some time in the NBA. But it looks like since they revamped everybody became a free agent who was on this roster before. It looks like he's going to get his opportunity to play some serious minutes.
I couldn't understand how the whole Dwight Howard signing went down. Supposedly, he was only going to go back to the Lakers if they could have given him a much better contract. He didn't want a small little contract because he did reestablish his value, not as an elite player, but certainly as a very useful player who could help a team. Yet he signed for the Sixers, not that much over the league minimum, it seemed, and on a 1-year deal. And the whole fit, putting him on the court with Joel Embiid and Simmons, somehow the mix doesn't quite seem to be there.
No, I don't think that it's a mix like that. I think that he's here for 2 reasons. One, Joel Embiid only plays about 30 minutes a game. When he plays more than 30 minutes a game, he becomes tired. So Dwight Howard really fits that mold. Secondly, I think that I'm a big fan of winners. And Dwight Howard has got 3 championships under his belt. I feel that he's going to be part of the catalyst to help this team learn how to actually win. And because winners know how to win, greatness, it doesn't matter how brief, stays with a person. Again, that's another movie quote from that.
Does he have 3 championships? I know the Lakers, and what else? He was with Orlando. They never won it there. And I can't recall anything beyond the Lakers. I'm not saying he didn't. I'd have to look it up, but it doesn't bounce.
Yeah, I thought I read that somewhere, so that's what it kind of stuck out to me. So it might be 3, it might be 2. The fact that he's able to win,
but he's
and
been
has
a handful. He's been a handful attitude-wise, and the Lakers gave him one last chance. Maybe when he was with the Lakers during the time Kobe Bryant couldn't take him, his immaturity. So they gave him one last chance under the leadership of LeBron James, and it worked out last year, to his credit. And coming maybe with a mature force like Doc Rivers as the head coach, maybe that keeps him in line. But what's the talk about Doc Rivers? How influential is he going to be to the Sixers after the coaching turmoil they had, under Brown for the last 7 years?
That he is such a breath of fresh air. That the one thing that the fandom in Philadelphia was having a hard time with Brown was that he felt like that he lost the team. They weren't listening to him, that the culture of losing sort of infiltrated Brown himself, and he didn't know how to coach to win anymore. And that was part of the issue on where the process kind of started to go a little stagnant. With Doc, first off, guys named Doc do really well in the city of Philadelphia. So that's really important, and secondly, that he was going to be able, that even though he's a player's coach, that he has the type of clout to be able to talk to Simmons and Embiid, where they have only ever had like the soft dad talking to them, saying, oh, it's okay, just do this, just do this. Now you're going to have a little bit more of a firm grasp on the game as a player's perspective, and somebody who's been there. He's won these championships. He's done these things, and he's going to make sure that he wants you to be put in the right position to be able to win championships. And I feel like that alone is the big deal in Philadelphia. That's why Brown finally had to go.
Okay, Jamie, we're going to have to let you go. We got to get some messages in here. Then we got Lance Meadow following behind you. Great having you on. Great job on the Eagles and the 76ers. Can't wait to have you back on next week. Have a great Thanksgiving, Jamie. And again, thank you for coming on.
Thank you guys for having me. Happy Thanksgiving to both of you and your families.
Same to you.
So there you go. Great Jamie P. They call him Pags. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to get to our commercials real quick here. Some official timeout stuff where we can come back on the other side. Lance Meadows due to come in. The great Lance Meadow, of course, the great broadcaster for the New York Giants. So he should be up right after these words, folks. Come on back and see us.
If you served honorably in our nation's armed forces and you're looking for a way to continue serving your fellow veterans in your community, then join AMVETS. Each year, AMVETS members volunteer millions of hours at VA healthcare facilities from coast to coast, helping to improve the lives of their fellow veterans through the VA Voluntary Services Program. AMVETS posts and departments also participate in a wide variety of community service projects, ranging from Americanism in our schools to supporting the Special Olympics and Boy Scouts of America. If you no longer wear the uniform today, you can still serve through the AMVETS by joining today at amvets.org.
When you hear the word asthma, you probably think of shortness of breath, coughing, or inhalers. Lots of things can trigger asthma, but the fact is that asthma doesn't just attack, it can kill. But with proper medical management, asthma is controllable. If you experience shortness of breath, wheezing, tightness in your chest, or persistent nighttime coughing, you may have asthma. See your doctor and get the facts. You'll breathe easier. For more information, call 211 Info Line. A message from the Connecticut Department of Public Health, keeping Connecticut healthy.
Hi, Grandma. What's for dinner?
Hey, honey, I'm making stew tonight.
Ooh, can Nina come over?
I'm not sure about our new friend. I wonder if there's been any drinking going on. Alcohol at her age can lead to so many bad things. I've been meaning to ask you, what would happen if someone offered you a drink?
Grandma?
This is hard. She's so young, but I know I need to talk to her about it now before someone tries to give her alcohol. If anyone ever does offer you a drink, I want you to say no. I have too much respect for my family, and I don't want to get in trouble.
Okay.
Really?
I promise, Grandma. I love you too.
Okay, how about tasting this stew and telling me what you think?
Some children may try alcohol as young as 9 years old. It's not too early to talk about drinking. For tips on how to begin the conversation, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov. That's underagedrinking.samhsa.gov. This message brought to you by SAMHSA and this station.
We all make choices. When it comes to alcohol, kids make choices whether to drink or not.
Bye-bye.
Remember, I'm going to Alex's party tonight and sleeping over.
Hey, have a seat for a second. Remind me about that party again?
And adults make choices whether to talk about it. That's true of parents and every other trusted adult in a kid's life. Kids want to know our expectations when it comes to alcohol and other drugs. They want guidance and honest answers to their questions. And it makes a difference when the message is consistent and part of everyday conversations. So talk with your kids and help lead them on a positive path. Because when you talk, they hear you. For more information about talking with your kids about underage use of alcohol and other drugs, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
If you talk and they will hear you every single time.
Now we're getting killed. Yeah, well, Kyle's not here. How come? Kicked off the team. Didn't Tim tell you? Kyle, some other kids got caught drinking beer in the park a couple of nights ago.
Really?
Yeah. 0 tolerance. He's out for the season.
Come on, it's a first offense, right?
That we know of. But why should that matter? He knew not to drink. I made it clear to Matt, that's what we expect from him. What have you said to Tim?
Nothing really. You know, a lot of kids try it at this age, so.
Yeah, well, a lot of kids don't try it too. I'm not saying that Matt's going to be this perfect kid, but if I don't tell him what we expect and why he shouldn't drink,
How's he gonna know? You think kids that age really listen? They never admit it, Bill, but they hear more than you think. Talk. They hear you. For more information about talking with kids about underage drinking, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
How we doing, everybody? Welcome to the Mac and Jack Sports Show, where we cover all the local professional sports, New York, Philly, and Boston. And we just had on the Philly guy, Pags, who come and gave us a little Eagles talk and Phillies 76ers talk. And right now, Jack, we have the great Lance Meadow sitting backstage, and we're going to bring him on, the busiest broadcaster in the business and great Giants broadcaster. So let's bring him up, Jack. How you doing today, Lance?
I'm doing very well, guys. How's everything with you?
Hey, Lance, in 1 week, you might be talking about the first place New York Giants. Who would have thought of that?
Yeah, I know. It's kind of crazy. But then again, I guess that's the nature of the NFC East right now, where it's pretty much survival of the fittest. And you got 4 teams with 3 wins, and it's basically going to come down to which quarterback probably protects the football the most efficiently and which defense is able to make some opportunistic plays. But it's been a wild season, and I think this is probably the only appropriate way for it to end, where it comes down to the final 5 or 6 games at this point.
Yeah, Lance, let's talk a little bit about the Eagles game, the last game the Giants played. It seemed to me that was their best complete team effort of the season. The running game, was picked up a lot. We talk about Smith. I want to talk about real quick, bringing him up from the practice squad, a former Redskin who was an All-Pro, and we got our hands on him. And he's not breaking the big ones like Gallman, but he's breaking off huge chunks of yardage. He's got great moves in the hole. He's got some power, and that kind of shows the Giants are serious about running the ball again. So that was a big pickup for the Giants getting Smith.
I think you're referring to Alfred Morris. Is that who you're talking about?
Alfred Morris. My bad.
Yeah, Alfred Morris and Wayne Goldman, who have provided a nice 1-2 punch. They've actually run as a team, the Giants, for at least 100 yards in each of the last 5 games. So I agree with you. I think that's been an important staple that has come alive as of late. I think the other factor as to why they won the last 2 games is also the fact that they didn't turn the ball over. And not just Daniel Jones, the team overall. I mean, guys, based on turnover differential, it's probably most indicative of wins or losses in the National Football League. And it was important for the Giants to finally get over that hump. But yeah, that combined with the rushing attack has been huge, because I think why the running game has been successful, number one, has been the improvement of the offensive line and then mixing and matching some personnel. That's number one. But number two, it's completely, to me, changed Daniel Jones's mindset. Because Daniel Jones now doesn't have to feel as if he needs to play hero ball and he has to put on the cape and come to the rescue. If you noticed earlier in the season, when Saquon Barkley went down, and then, of course, they lost Sterling Shepard for a period of time, I think Daniel Jones, in the back of his mind, he said, I'm limited in terms of playmakers. I've got to do something to help this team. I have to press the envelope. And what happens when you have that mindset is you do a little too much and you are prone to turning over the ball. Now I think he is of the mindset, okay, Sterling Shepard's back. They've boosted some wide receivers from the practice squad. To your point, Alfred Morris was brought in with Wayne Goldman, and now he feels as if there's enough creativity within the offense, there's enough balance that he doesn't have to do everything himself. So all of those things seems to be coming together at the perfect time, and they're going to have to continue that if they want to win some more football games here down the stretch.
Now they cut Corey Coleman from the practice squad. He was a former first-round pick a few years ago by Cleveland. What's the purpose of cutting someone from a practice squad? Because I don't get it. I mean, he's not hurting the team being on the practice squad at this point in the year. You'd think he'd be helping during practice. Is he that ineffective during practice where they cut a guy at this point of the year?
Well, I think it really is more of a numbers game. I mean, keep in mind, even though the practice squad expanded this year to accommodate the coronavirus and so forth, you still can't keep everybody. So right now, I think the Giants are of the mindset with Caden Smith, for example, on the COVID-19 reserve list still, and it's still in question whether or not he's going to be ready for the upcoming game. They added, if you notice, the tight end to the roster to take the place of Corey Coleman. So to me, it really comes down to more of a numbers game. I don't think it's a reflection that Corey Coleman, they didn't look at as somebody that can be productive. I mean, he actually, I thought, had a really good training camp. It was actually one of the surprises, if you recall, that didn't make the 53-man roster after coming back from the torn ACL. So this was his second stint with the team. But once again, it's more of what do you need at this point in order to make sure that you have a wholesome 53-man roster to work with entering the game against the Cincinnati Bengals. And that's really why the move was made. Caden Smith's on the reserve list. You need an extra tight end. If you have to call somebody up, you at least have a few days to get that player acclimated and so forth. So it really was more of that, I think, than necessarily a negative reflection of what Corey Coleman could bring to this team.
Hey, Lance, you spoke about the offensive line, and of course, I want to talk to you a little bit. You're a little more closer to the Giants than both of us. Colombo, there was a big disagreement. You know, the head coach brings in a consultant, probably hurt his pride a little bit, got a little upset. And it looked like the offensive line is really starting to gel now. I see them, they're pulling the center, they're pulling guards, they're doing a lot of good double team blocking up the middle where they're running really well. How does this affect the Giants' offensive line if it does at all? How do you think this will go over in the next couple of weeks?
Well, I think the main way that it affects the young players, because let's face it, it is a very young offensive line, is when the new offensive line coach comes in, who is Dave DeGuglielmo, and if he wants them to tweak some of their fundamentals, the nuances of the game, I think that to me would be the biggest effect. I don't think, though, Joe Judge brought in another offensive lineman to say, let's shake things up. Okay, let's completely revamp everything we've been doing. I think in his estimation, because remember, they have history together going back to their Patriots days, he's bringing in somebody that's going to preach the fundamentals that Joe Judge had been emphasizing when he took on a more prominent role coaching up the offensive line over the last few weeks. So if anything, we're just talking about maybe the subtleties and, of course, a different voice. Listen, every coach is different, right? Every coach has different mannerisms in terms of how they handle film sessions, whether or not they're overly critical of players, whether or not they take a step back. And remember, Mark Colombo was a former NFL offensive lineman. So I think his relationship with the current offensive lineman is going to be a little bit different than Dave DeGuglielmo. Not that DeGuglielmo has not been around the league. It's just I think the relationship is a little bit different when you're hearing it from somebody that's been in the trenches himself. So those are the dynamics, I think, that are in play that are going to change. But once again, Joe Judge is bringing in somebody that has a history with him, somebody who he understands the coaching techniques and he believes is going to come in and help him now focus on the other aspects of the team that perhaps he was taking himself away from if he was dedicating his time to the offensive line. But no, I don't really think this is a drastic difference that is going to happen with respect to the offensive line. You're not going to rock the boat so much, guys, when you only have 6 games left. I mean, you can only move so many mountains at this point. And I think the last thing you want to do, by the way, as I mentioned, since this offensive line is so young, and they've only had 10 games and they've been mixing and matching, is to come in and say, okay, now we're going to do it my way. That, I think, then makes you more prone to errors and mental mistakes. So I think Dave DeGuglielmo has been around the league for plenty of time. He's worked with a variety of different players. That the goal is, let me take some activities off the table from Joe Judge. Let me allow him to focus on other aspects of the team. And let's hope that I can focus on the fundamentals that maybe need to be fine-tuned to take this offensive line to the next level. That, I think, really, at the end of the day, is probably the biggest difference that the offensive line is going to have to do.
When Joe Judge first got the job, was he allowed to pick his coaching staff, or did he basically go along with certain things? Like Jason Garrett as his offensive coordinator, did he just agree to that? And with Colombo, did he just agree to take Colombo on, or did he truly have a say to put together his own staff from the get-go?
Well, it's an interesting question. I mean, from what I've heard and just from other coaches I've talked to, I think the worst move that a front office could ever do is to force assistant coaches on a head coach. I think if you ask most GMs that are savvy and have been around the league for quite some time, they will tell you the crucial decision is to allow a head coach to put together his own staff. Now, with that being said, I'm sure Dave Gettleman made recommendations to Joe Judge and said, hey, we've got a few guys that were on the previous staff. I think you should heavily consider them during the interview process. Case in point, Thomas McGahee stayed on as the special teams coordinator, okay? Tyke Tolbert stayed on as the wide receivers coach. But to get back to your question about the offensive line, what I think a lot of people forget is Dave DeGuglielmo was considered in the interview process. Judge interviewed him, and he was one of the finalists with Mark Colombo. They ultimately decided to hire Mark Colombo. The other thing to keep in mind is Colombo worked with Jason Garrett in Dallas. And when you're implementing a new offense, from the offensive coordinator's perspective, to get back to the framework of your question, if I'm Jason Garrett, I want to have some assistants around me that are familiar with the offense to help them implement my vision, right, as the coordinator. So I'm sure when Joe Judge sat down with Jason Garrett, he may have asked Jason, hey, who have you worked with? Who do you feel comfortable with, whether it be a positional coach or somebody else that can help you? And I'm sure Jason Garrett made that recommendation, because here's another thing that's somewhat coincidental, which is why perspective's needed. Jason Garrett in 2018 was the Cowboys head coach. He had an offensive line coach by the name of Paul Alexander. In 2018, the Cowboys won the division. Mark Colombo was an assistant on staff. Midway through the season, around October, I believe, they decided to part ways with Paul Alexander, who, by the way, is a very fundamentally sound veteran offensive line coach. He promoted Mark Colombo. Now, all of a sudden, the shoe's on the other foot, where Colombo was the coach, and he's being replaced. The reason I bring that up is this is not uncharted territory. I know it seems very weird that you got to change. You're a first-year head coach. It's been done before. But once again, I think any good head coach is going to listen to some of his coordinators and say, hey, who do you have prior work experience with? Who do you have a good relationship with? Let me interview them. Let me see if they're a good fit. And I think that's what somewhat came to fruition with Mark Colombo. But at the end of the day, he had considered Dave DeGuglielmo for the job. And it's somebody that also has been with so many different teams, has a history, as I mentioned, with Joe Judge, that at the end of the day, he let things play out. It didn't work. Now he's going to go in a different direction.
And to add to that, Lance, that Dave also coached on the Giants Super Bowl teams on the offensive side of the ball. So
he was under Tom Coughlin. Yeah.
Yes, he did. So we got Xavier McKinney coming back, the X-Man coming back. They're on the active roster from what I read. Where do you think McKinney's going to fit in? I mean, we got two starting safeties. Our defensive backfield is playing very well, considering how young they are. Brad Berry's doing an awesome job. Where do you think McKinney's going to fit in there? And how about the X-Man? Where do you think he's going to fit in with the linebackers, who are also doing a very good job?
Yeah, McKinney is a versatile player. We tend to forget that he's on the team because it's been so long since, unfortunately, he suffered the fractured foot back in August and has been on IR since the start of the regular season. The dynamics in play between Jabril Peppers and Logan Ryan, I would argue, are very strong right now. And that's a good thing for the Giants, because you don't have to throw in McKinney and give him X amount of snaps. I think what they're going to do is they'll probably provide some new looks within those three guys. They'll mix and match players. Here's the good news. Ryan could be slid into the slot because he's been a cornerback, and we've seen him actually move in there even early in the season. So I wouldn't be surprised if Patrick Graham employs a look where he has Peppers and McKinney at safety, and then he brings Ryan back down to the line of scrimmage and has him match up with perhaps a wide receiver, and then maybe brings in McKinney down near the box. Because if you go back and you look at how Nick Saban utilized him in Alabama, I mean, he was basically a Renaissance man. He did a little bit of everything, got to the quarterback, played center field, middle of the field. So that's good news for Patrick Graham. I think he is going to mix and match guys, but I also would not expect McKinney to come in and them all of a sudden to give him 40 to 50 snaps right away. Don't expect that. Expect it to be a slow progression where they want to get his feet wet, number one. They want to see what he could do within a game. Remember, this is not somebody that had a preseason game. This is somebody that has not been in a football game since going back to his college days in Alabama. It's been quite some time, guys. So I think expectations need to be kept in check. But one thing Patrick Graham has done, you could tell if you look at the snap counts and you look at even week to week, he is not stuck by the same game plan. He'll play one guy 50 snaps one week, and then he may get 10 snaps the next week. So this is why McKinney is beneficial in that regard, because there's going to be games where down the road, McKinney is probably going to get a lot of snaps. But in the early stages, I think they're going to work him along slowly. And the good news is Logan Ryan is an X factor here because Ryan can be moved around. So that can give McKinney an opportunity to get some snaps at safety. And it could also give Ryan an opportunity to get back to corner. Remember, he played corner for the bulk of his career before he made the move to safety. And in today's NFL, when they're lining up 3 wide receivers, you need sometimes to take that safety and bring him down closer to the line of scrimmage. So I think Ryan's presence was a great addition, and I think it's afforded Patrick Graham an opportunity to get a little bit more creative than maybe what he was anticipating before Logan Ryan arrived.
Well, you mentioned safeties. Jabril Peppers has really come on this year. It seems like he's going to be a nice piece for the Giants for years to come, returning kicks. When the trade was made for Odell Beckham, people torched the Giants for that deal. And in the first year, Peppers did seem to be a little bit of an underachiever, but his game has seemed to have been lifted this year. Is it my imagination, or has he come on a bit?
No, not at all. I mean, the only thing I would add is I think 2019's defense overall was a disappointment, not just necessarily Jabril Peppers, given the fact that that team struggled immensely in terms of making stops and put more pressure on the offense. But you brought up a very good point about Peppers' contributions on special teams. Let's not lose sight of that. He's not just necessarily a guy that's going to bring a lot to the table from a defensive perspective, but he's a dangerous return man. And there was a game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on Monday night. We almost saw him take it to the house. So we could see he is dynamic with respect to that. But yeah, I think he's more and more comfortable in Patrick Graham's scheme. And I think Patrick Graham, just like Jason Garrett, when you get 10 games into a season, you get a better feel for what your players can do effectively and where your players struggle. So I think Patrick Graham is at that stage where he says, okay, Jabril could do this well. I'm not going to rock the boat. That's where I'm going to put him, period. End of discussion. And that's why I like the addition of McKinney, because it could free up Peppers to do other things. It could free up Ryan to do other things. That's what I think may help them in the long run here.
You know, Lance, we thought going into the season that the defensive backfield was going to be the maybe worst of the defense before we got Bradbury. Of course, we got him. We pick up Logan Ryan. Holmes is playing lights out. I mean, who do you think is more responsible for this, big turnaround on defensive backs? Do you think it's just the defensive backfield coach? Do you think it's the scheme? Is it everything included? Is it a pass rush that seems to be getting back to the quarterback this year? I mean, I know they're all little parts of it, but we really thought that's where they were going to really be bad this year and young was a defensive backfield. So what are your thoughts on that? Are you surprised?
Well, I think I'm a little surprised from the defense overall, to answer your question. I agree with you. I mean, when you look at the expectations of this group, I don't think it was very high because of the question marks across the board. It wasn't just the secondary. Remember, they didn't have an elite pass rusher, a guy that, to me, was going to put fears in the opposition and say, hey, double team me. And then maybe that was going to free up opportunities for other individuals. So, yeah, I definitely agree that this defense has played above expectations. And I think it goes back to Patrick Graham and his scheme and his creativeness, whether it be zone, whether it be man-to-man, a different week. He is really tailoring this defense to the strengths of the opposition. He's not saying to himself, hey, this is our scheme, and we're going to go out, and that's the style of play that we're going to showcase each and every week. And I think that's a sign of a really good coordinator in terms of taking what you have and saying, okay, what's the best match for who we're playing this week? And the best match this week may not be the ideal game plan the following week. I do think, though, the number 2 corner is still very much in question in terms of, who's going to be the answer opposite James Bradbury. If you notice, they've mixed and matched guys. Ryan Lewis we saw, Isaac Yadam. So, they're still working with that. But Darnay Holmes has flashed. The arrival of Logan Ryan, as I mentioned, was huge. When training camp started, Ryan was not in the picture. So I think that has helped.
What about Corey Ballantyne? There were big plans for him.
Yeah, and Ballantyne is no longer on the team. He's a member of the New York Jets, which just goes to show you.
The practice squad, I believe.
Yeah, which is why it's important to have options opposite James Bradbury, because you knew going in you weren't going to have one guy in particular that was probably going to play there every single game. but because there's a lot of youth there. Ryan Luce doesn't have a lot of experience. Isaac Yiadom doesn't even have a lot of experience when you look at his career overall going back to the Broncos. And that's why I think the philosophy was, hey, let's go with the volume. Let's have the best man win the competition. And one game we may start Yiadom. The other game we may start Lewis. And that's pretty much how things have played out. But I think the scheme, going back to your question, I would credit that, why I think this defense has been able to play consistently. And also them realizing we can't lean on one guy to get after the quarterback. It's going to be piecemeal. And if you look at the numbers, they've got 25 sacks. Nobody has more than 5 sacks. That's Leonard Williams. So everybody else, it's been spread the wealth. And it just goes to show you, you're not necessarily going to put fear in the eyes of the opposition when you don't have an elite pass rusher, but you could still be productive if you scheme accordingly. And that's exactly what Patrick Graham has done.
Great point. Great point. For the first time, I think this year, Lance, we're favored against a team we're playing against, the Cincinnati Bengals. On paper, we should beat them. Of course, Burrows went down. I just hope that the Giants don't take this one a little too soft, and they come out and play as aggressive as they have the last 3 weeks, because this on paper should be a win, and it feels really good to even say that, Lance.
Well, it is an attractive matchup. Completely agree with you. Actually, interestingly, just before I came on, I saw that, according to reports, it looks like the Bengals are not going to start Ryan Finley, by the way. They're going to start Brandon Allen, who they just called up from the practice squad, who had a few starts with the Denver Broncos. He's been in the league for a few years. Finley's completion percentage was well below 50% over the course of his career. So I'm not surprised at all that the Bengals are trying to explore other options. But the bottom line is, it's not Joe Burrow. We could sit here and we could talk about it. It could be Ken Anderson. It could be Boomer Esiason. It's not Joe Burrow. So by default, the Giants have an advantage there. But as you alluded to somewhat, it is somewhat of a dangerous game. And the reason being is, number one, they're coming off the bye, and they've played very well before the bye. Is there the rust factor? Do they pick up where they left off? That's number one. Number two, when you play a quarterback who there's not a great deal of film on, who has not made a start this season, sometimes you can argue that's advantage to the offense, because you're really playing the guessing game. Where has he come along since he last started at Denver? What are they asking him to do with the Bengals, considering he was with a different team last year? That chess match, that game of checkers, who does it have an early advantage with in the early stages of the game? You could argue, well, maybe now the Bengals are going to get a little bit creative. So, I could see it both ways, but with the way the Giants are performing and with the way that the offense specifically is protecting the football and they're running the ball, yes, there's no reason to think that the Giants can't go on the road in Cincinnati and win a game against a team that both mentally and physically is hurting, because the last thing they were anticipating was losing their rookie franchise quarterback. So there's no doubt about it. This is an attractive matchup, but considering, as you guys know, every game has come down to the wire and nothing has come easy for this team, the last thing I would be crowning any opponent for the Giants is a picnic, okay? Because nothing has come relatively easy for this team over the course of the season.
Lance, players are human, even though they're saying it's one game at a time. That's all they're focusing on is Cincinnati. They don't care about the standings. They're just thinking of this Sunday. They're human. They're looking at the big picture, and they're aware that they can make the playoffs. And that has to be a big motivating factor.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's convenient, to your point, for players to come out and give all the cliches. It's one game at a time. Yeah. We can't get ahead of ourselves. This could be a trap game. Wonderful. I'm glad. Thank you. Robotics 101. It's work to a T. Yeah, we're not naive.
Like Max says, he thinks one show at a time. He doesn't look at the big picture. All the guests and all the shows you have coming up. He's only thinking of today, but he's lying.
Yeah, he's got a million different things on his mind. He just puts on a very good face and is able to perform admirably, show in and show out. But let's not fool anybody. There's no doubt about it.
I just say one thing about Dave Gettleman. I think he's taken a bit of a bad rap. Whenever the team isn't going well, he gets the blame. Like with Leonard Williams. Leonard Williams has played very well this year, as far as I'm concerned. And even though it hasn't translated into sacks, he's gotten pressure on the quarterbacks. He's altered plays. And Dave Gettleman was criticized in the beginning of the year for giving up those draft picks for Leonard Williams. But I believe, and then they re-signed him. I believe it's worked out very well, that deal.
Well, Leonard Williams, here's the crazy thing. If you look at the numbers closely, Leonard Williams is pressuring the quarterback pretty much at the same rate that he was, even when you go back to his days with the Jets. The difference is, as you just brought up, the sacks are showing up. He's got 5 sacks. He leads the team. And 7 is his career high. So Leonard Williams is on pace to have a career high in sacks. But that's what, from the optics standpoint, right? You feel warm and fuzzy when you look at the box score and you see, okay, a guy that they gave up draft picks for, he's starting to finish. That's the biggest difference, though, guys. He's still being that disruptive, pressuring the quarterback force like he was with the Jets. The thing is, now it's translating to sacks. And I think that goes back to, by the way, Mac, what you were bringing up with respect to the coaching and the scheme. What's the biggest difference? Sean Spencer, who's the defensive line coach, I think that's registering with Leonard Williams. The message is, and Joe Judge too, what they've told Leonard Williams is, Leonard, don't feel as if you have to have what I was talking about earlier, the Daniel Jones mindset of being the hero and doing too much. Let the process play out. Do what you've been doing. We guarantee you, you're going to get those sacks. They're going to come. Whether they come in bunches, whether they come in piecemeal, they're going to come. And I think that's pretty much shown off and shown up consistently. The other point that I wanted to bring up with respect to Dave Gettleman, and as you mentioned with, maybe the criticism being a little bit too much, forget Leonard Williams. How about the fact that James Bradbury, Blake Martinez, and Logan Ryan are 3 free agent additions?
Blake Martinez has been amazing.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. I mean, he's been consistent. Bradbury leads the NFL in passes defense. And we talked about earlier how critical Logan Ryan has been. So some of the additions that they've brought in, and Ryan was a late addition, has proved to bring some nice value on top of some of these rookies who are playing, whether it be on the offensive line or it be on the defensive side of the ball. So all in all, I think the Giants have made some key moves, and that's a big reason why they are still very much in the thick of things.
One more thing before we let you go, Lance. The remaining schedule for the 4 teams, Dallas has on paper, again, of course, you got to go out in the field and win, but they have the easiest schedule ahead of them. We still got to play them one more time. I think it's the last game of the season, as a matter of fact. Washington seems to be very competitive. Alex Smith is a great story. And the Eagles, no matter how they're sinking, they still are in first place right now. What are your feelings as far as, and not being a Giants broadcaster and a Giants fan, what are your feelings about the end of the season? Do you think Dallas has the best shot, or the Giants, who are playing the best right now, I think, in the league, do you think they have it all a chance to win this division?
Well, I cover the entire NFL for Sirius, so you don't have to worry about prefacing it in terms of me being favorable to the Giants. I try to have an open eye, very much so, when I look at the division. And it is a great point. This is how I've classified it, because I feel like this is deja vu all over again. This conversation has come up with various different people over the last few weeks. The Eagles are still in the driver's seat because they're 3-6-1. Mathematically, they have the edge. And until that changes, guys, I don't eliminate them from having that hold. Number 2, I think the Giants are the most dangerous team in the division, because I think they're starting to click. And you can argue they're playing their most consistent football, which we hadn't seen early in the season. The Cowboys, who you just brought up, they're the most intriguing team. And here's why they're the most intriguing team. Andy Dalton, when he took over for Dak Prescott, if you recall, in the second half of that first Giants game, had set the Cowboys up for 2 field goals to help them win that game. Then shortly after that, he got hurt. He suffered the concussion 2 games later against Washington, and then was dealing with the coronavirus. So prior to the Vikings game this Sunday, which he performed very well, threw 3 touchdowns, protected the ball, we had a small sample size of Andy Dalton. And Andy Dalton has a lot of experience, and he helped the Bengals get to the playoffs 5 straight years. That, to me, is not coincidental, okay? I would argue he's one of the most underrated quarterbacks in NFL history, because more often than not, he's helped his team get to the playoffs. And you know what? In order to win a championship, you got to get there first. And I don't think quarterbacks get enough credit for that. But what you saw on Sunday was an offense that, when it protects the football, when it has most of its guys healthy, and they just moved Zach Martin, their Pro Bowl guard, out to tackle, which I thought helped them a lot in terms of pass protection, this Cowboys offense is more than capable of putting 30-some-odd points on the board. And you're right, they don't have an overwhelming schedule. With the exception of Baltimore, I would argue I think they're capable of winning just about all of those games. So Dallas is a team that should not be dismissed, should not be overlooked. And by the way, Dallas also has a matchup against each of their divisional foes. They play Washington, Philly, and the Giants. They're 1-2. They still have an opportunity to get to 4-2 in the division. So once again, it all comes back to the most intriguing team to me is the Cowboys. The Giants are dangerous, but the Giants have a far more difficult schedule than Dallas does. They got to play Seattle. The Giants, they got to play Arizona. They've got to play Baltimore, and they got to play Cleveland. And all of those teams may have had their fair share of ups and downs, but all of those teams are also competing for playoff spots. So
and I
this is going to
trust
be
Alex Smith the most out of any quarterback in the NFC East at the moment.
Yeah, and he's played good football, Alex
Yeah.
Smith. And it's a heck of a story. And Alex Smith has a track record of protecting the football. That's been his MO throughout the course of his career. I will say, though, if you ask me based on the paper test guys, if I was to look at the personnel he has around him compared to what Andy Dalton is working with, I think it's night and day. I don't think it's even close. So if the Cowboys play up to expectations from an offensive standpoint, I think they have a far more better chance to win more games. You could argue Washington is working with a stronger front four. Those guys are big bruisers, but Dallas, to me, can make up for that in terms of their capacity to put points on the board. And that's what makes them, to me, a far more dangerous team than Washington. Here's the other thing from the Giants' perspective. Remember, the Giants have already swept Washington. So that's the one team that you're not overwhelmingly concerned because you hold the tiebreaker. But Dallas, you still play in the final game of the season. But even if you beat Dallas, and who knows how things are going to play out, Dallas already beat you once. So if I'm the Giants, I'm looking at it more of Dallas and Philadelphia because you split with Philly. You still can maybe well control your own destiny with Dallas. Washington, you already took care of business. So you're not overly concerned about what plays out with Washington. It's more about Dallas and Philadelphia. So that's why my focus, at least if I'm the Giants, I'm looking more of what challenges do those two teams pose as opposed to perhaps what Washington brings to the table.
Very good points. And you know, if the Giants want to go to playoffs, they're going to have to beat some playoff teams, and that's just the way it is. And that's all. Again, Lance, thank you for coming in.
Lance.
Oh, my God. We love having you on. You unbelievable knowledge and information. And I know you're very busy, so we appreciate the time you coming in and seeing us once in a while. Have a great Thanksgiving, Lance.
You as well. Happy turkey to all. Always good talking with you guys, and look forward to coming on future dates. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Lance.
Thank you, Lance. So there we go. The great Lance Meadow. Come on in and give us a lot of information about the Giants and the NFL.
I mean, Lance knows the whole NFL game. We got to throw my Jets a bone and let him talk a little about them next week, too.
Why do you want to
not a lot, a little, but they have to come up in conversation. I mean, none of the intimate stuff about the players, just basic.
Why do you want to scare him off the show, Jack? Why do you want to scare that man off the show?
This is a brutal Jet year for me. I mean, I'm watching the games, and I don't know whether I should root for them or not. I don't want to mess up the number one pick.
Yeah, I hear you, but I would imagine that you are rooting for them to win every week, Jack. So before we take our quick break, I do have a trivia question for you, Jack, which I know you appreciate me doing this. This trivia question is brought to you by Z Catering. Does small to big parties, whether weddings or small parties like graduations, anniversaries, and birthdays. Z Catering will take care of you. 5 restaurants with top-line chefs preparing your food. Their food truck is perfect for your brewery or busy club when you need food to open up. The truck is a little restaurant on wheels with a big variety of choices. Check out Z Catering on the Mac and Jack's Sports Insiders website at macandjacksports.com. Z Catering is Z-licious, Jack. So, with that being said, Jack, here comes your trivia question for today.
I'm all psyched.
Okay, I know you are. So, this is an NBA trivia question, Jack, for you. So, which NBA superstar fouled Isaiah Thomas so hard in 1991 it left him permanently scarred for life, Jack?
That was Call the Mailman Malone.
Yes, sir.
Viciously hit Isaiah Thomas. And I'm going to tell you, it goes back to the Dream Team with Isaiah Thomas being left off. Karl Malone was a member of the Dream Team. He hated Isaiah Thomas's guts. Magic Johnson didn't want Isaiah on there. Michael Jordan didn't want him. Scottie Pippen didn't want him. It doesn't make Isaiah a bad person. You're part of the Detroit Piston bad boys. You're hated.
Right.
But let me tell you something about with Karl Malone. The Pistons kind of got a little bit revenge on Karl Malone late on. I don't know whether you realize. In Bill Lambert's last game, I mean, that he was playing against Karl Malone. He was Isaiah Thomas's buddy. He got Karl Malone back with a cheap shot and knocked him to the ground to kind of get some revenge for his buddy Isaiah Thomas. And when Bill Lambert went back to the Piston bench, they were all shaking his hand and patting him on the back. But you know what became ironic? After Bill Lambert got after Bill Lambert got Karl Malone back in the WNBA, Bill Lambert coached Karl Malone's daughter.
Wow.
That for
That's
full circle. Yeah.
That's a great information, Jack. I didn't realize that. So we'll be coming back after this break, folks. We're going to have this day in history. I might even have a thought for the day before that. We haven't done that in a while, Jack. So we'll be back after these few minutes. People, stick with us, and we'll be right back.
If you served honorably in our nation's armed forces and you're looking for a way to continue serving your fellow veterans in your community, then join AMVETS. Each year, AMVETS members volunteer millions of hours in VA healthcare facilities from coast to coast, helping to improve the lives of their fellow veterans through the VA Voluntary Services Program. AMVETS posts and departments also participate in a wide variety of community service projects, ranging from Americanism in our schools to supporting the Special Olympics and Boy Scouts of America. If you no longer wear the uniform today, you can still serve through the AMVETS by joining today at amvets.org.
When you hear the word asthma, you probably think of shortness of breath, coughing, or inhalers. Lots of things can trigger asthma, but the fact is that asthma doesn't just attack, it can kill. But with proper medical management, asthma is controllable. If you experience shortness of breath, wheezing, tightness in your chest, or persistent nighttime coughing, you may have asthma. See your doctor and get the facts. You'll breathe easier. For more information, call 211 Infoline. A message from the Connecticut Department of Public Health, keeping Connecticut healthy.
Hi, Grandma. What's for dinner?
Hey, honey, I'm making stew tonight.
Ooh, can Nina come over?
I'm not sure about our new friend. I wonder if there's been any drinking going on. Alcohol at her age can lead to so many bad things. I've been meaning to ask you, what would happen if someone offered you a drink?
Grandma?
This is hard. She's so young, but I know I need to talk to her about it now before someone tries to give her alcohol. If anyone ever does offer you a drink, I want you to say no. I have too much respect for my family, and I don't want to get in trouble.
Okay.
Really?
I promise, Grandma. I love you too.
Okay, how about tasting this stew and telling me what you think?
Some children may try alcohol as young as 9 years old. It's not too early to talk about drinking. For tips on how to begin the conversation, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov. That's underagedrinking.samhsa.gov. This message brought to you by SAMHSA and this station.
If you talk and they will hear you every single time.
Now we're getting killed.
Yeah, well, Kyle's not here.
How come?
Kicked off the team. Didn't Tim tell you? Found some other kid I caught drinking beer in the park a couple of nights ago.
Really?
Yeah. Zero tolerance. He's out for the season.
Come on, it's the first offense, right?
That we know of.
I got the trivia question incorrect today.
I made it clear to Matt, that's what we expect.
Yeah.
Nothing really. You know, a lot of kids tried at this age, so.
Yeah, well, a lot of kids don't try it too. I'm not saying that Matt's going to be this perfect kid. If I don't tell him what we expect and why he shouldn't drink, how's he going to know?
You think kids that age really listen?
They never admit it, though, but they hear more than you think.
Oh, they hear you. For more information about talking with kids about underage drinking, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
Try.
Yes, sir. Welcome back to the Mac and Jack Sports Show. We're on every Wednesday through Sunday at 8 to 10 a.m. I'm your host, Mac, with my co-host and your co-host, Jack Hirsch. And, Jack, we had two dynamite guests on so far today. I mean, the Philly sports guy, we're going to call him Pags. It's Jamie Palia or something like that. But we call him Pags with some great Philly insight on the Eagles and even on the 76ers. And as basketball gets closer and we start playing some games, he'll be here talking about them also. And we had, of course, the great Lance Meadow on. Lance is, the knowledge of the Giants he has doing those podcasts. But as you mentioned and he mentioned, he does all NFL. He's been on ESPN. He's been on Westwood One. I call him the busiest man in the business because he's on everything. And when he comes in here, he gives us some great information about the Giants, stuff that we don't know and a lot of fans don't know, Jack.
Well, fascinating stuff. Listening to him convinced me that the Giants are going to draft a cornerback this year.
Yes, he pointed out what a great job the defense is doing against all the teams, against even some of the high-power teams this year. And, of course, they got Cincinnati coming up Sunday, and we'll get into that as we go through the week. I really haven't done Thought for the Day in a while. I've got a few things that I've written down. If you got one, too, you can follow up.
Well, I just want to say one thing quickly, just the thought of the day. A friend of mine, Henry Hascup, the president of the New Jersey Boxing Hall of Fame, he lost his son, Henry Jr., a couple of days ago, one of his 4 kids, his oldest son. And, my heart aches for him, as does everyone in the boxing community. Henry's also like a sports information man. All these sites look him up for sports information. He's a true historian, a great guy. And he's touched so many people's hearts. And, we think of him, what he has to go through. And he's in all our thoughts, Henry Hascup and his family.
Yeah, and the Mac and Jack show, of course, sent out our condolences to him and his family.
Yeah.
So the thought for the day, Jack, I was watching the games as I normally do. Sometimes I don't get to see the whole game depending on my work schedule. But I watched Chris Collinsworth, and he's a great color man. He describes plays well. He breaks them down. But he fell into the trap of the sugar statement that many commentators do, and he should know better. He stated that Patrick Mahomes is the best player in the league and on his way to being the best player ever. He didn't put quarterback in place of player, and even as a quarterback, I feel Patrick Mahomes has a long way to go to be considered the best quarterback ever. I mean, there's too many quarterbacks in front of him right now that have done and accomplished a lot more than he has. Patrick Mahomes can't block a 300-pound defensive lineman that runs under 5 seconds in a 40-yard dash every play. He can't run the ball over 25 times a game, a quarter of them up the middle, being hit by huge linebackers and safeties. He can't run patterns all day and catch the ball going up against some of the best cornerbacks in the league. He can't tackle a 230-pound running back who runs a 4.4. The quarterback position, Jack, is successful by the team and scheme around him more than any other position on the field. Patrick Mahomes is an incredible quarterback. He makes unbelievable plays. Perhaps right now the best in the league as far as a quarterback goes. But to say he's the best player in the league, no.
Well, it's his 4th year in the league, Mac. It's his 4th year in the league. So it's fair enough to say a 4th-year player is the best player, if you want to give that opinion. But I understand what you're saying. It's hard to match up position for position. Is he better in his position than maybe an elite player is in their position?
Right. And I mean, listen, again, we've seen a lot of quarterbacks, Jack, in history that were really good quarterbacks, but they didn't have a team around them that, that could make them more successful than they were. A prime example, Tom Brady with the great staff they have there, and the Patriots, the great team around them defensively, offensively, and special teams wise. And if he didn't have that team around him, who knows? I guarantee you he wouldn't be as successful as he is considered today. So I just think that we seem to say names to grab headlines and to make statements when football truly is a team sport, maybe more than any other team. And a team sport league, I mean, you could put hockey in there if you like, and you wouldn't be wrong. But again, I hate the statements of saying that somebody's the best player in the league when he's responsible, yes, for the team to be successful, but it's just as much the team to make him successful. And I just don't like statements like that, Jack.
Well, Mac, but quarterbacks normally are the focus. Let's say hypothetically, let's make believe that we could pull a deal for the rest of the season and the quarterbacks could quickly learn the system, and Mahomes went to the Philadelphia Eagles and Carson Wentz went to the Chiefs.
Right.
Chiefs might still be successful and win, but the upside of the Eagles would be all of a sudden become much greater.
Agree.
Okay, much, much greater if Mahomes was there, because chances are last Sunday he wouldn't have been sacked for safety in the end zone. He wouldn't have thrown the pick six. It does kind of add. The quarterbacks are major difference makers. I mean, you can't diminish that in any way, shape, or form. Whether it's the most important position in sports is debatable. You take a goalie for hockey or soccer. If they have a bad game, they could destroy their own team single-handedly. But I wouldn't diminish with Mahomes. I understand what you're saying. To start calling him maybe the greatest quarterback of all time would be a little premature. But if you match him up against the other top quarterbacks like Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers today, it's debatable who's the best. But if you say it's Mahomes, I mean, it's hard to argue against it to me because he's a Super Bowl champion.
Right.
And the Chiefs are 9-1 this year. So it's kind of really hard to argue against it. You could disagree, but I don't get hype about that. Not the way Mahomes is playing.
I agree. I agree with everything you're saying. But again, Jack, I mean, Lawrence Taylor was an incredible defensive outside linebacker.
Yeah.
Probably the greatest in history. But to say, and people call Jim Brown the greatest player in history as a running back. And, to me, I think it would be more wise if you said by position, because there are unique things that each player has to do to be successful. Patrick Mahomes just happens to be doing it better than anybody else right now in the league. So let's get to our birthdays and this day in history in sports, which we also have events on. And the first I'm going to bring up, Jack, is in 1949, Ted Williams wins the American League MVP. Was there, I would say he could be in the top 5 of baseball history, Jack.
The splendid splinter. Top 5 hitters. Ted Williams wasn't an all-around player. He was a slouch in the outfield. Didn't throw well. Didn't run the bases well. Phenomenal hitter. I think it was 1949 where the Yankees and Red Sox had that magical year. I think it was 49 that with 2 games left in the season, the Red Sox held a 1-game lead over the Yankees, and then they played the Yankees the last 2 at Yankee Stadium, and the Yankees won those 2 games to overtake them. And I think the Yankees erased a 4-0 deficit too in one of those games. So those Red Sox teams Ted Williams was playing on were great teams, but the Yankees were just barely better. And Ted Williams never got that elusive World Series title.
Very true. In 1951, the Cleveland Browns are penalized for 209 yards, Jack, against the Chicago Bears. I've never heard nothing like that.
Penalized, you said?
Penalized for 209 yards, Jack. That's 2 football fields.
That's before Dick Butkus. I mean, I don't know where the penalties came from, but okay.
The Browns were penalized, not the Bears, Jack. So
Browns. Oh,
yeah.
Okay. We'd have considering the clout that the Cleveland coach Paul Brown had, wow, he must have really ticked off the officials.
Yeah, that's crazy. I've never heard
Yeah.
nothing like that. In 1952, the only win for the NFL's Dallas Texans, Jack, beating the Bears 27-23. The Dallas Texans moved on to become the Kansas City Chiefs after they, in those days, the franchises weren't as, I could say, lucrative as they are today, Jack.
I think they got kicked out of the NFL and they became the Dallas Texans in the AFL before becoming. Maybe I'm wrong there, but
well, I know they did move to Kansas City, and the owner named them, of course, the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, no, I think they were the Dallas Texans before, and then they became the franchise switched.
Oh, it's a good point, Jack, because the AL Texans are the ones that moved
AFL,
to Kansas
City.
Right. That's why I tell you, you're our historian, Jack. Great point.
Yeah, there was this famous AFL title game in which it went into overtime. Forgot the player, but he was instructed whether to call heads or tails. He called the opposite one. So not only did they not get the ball, but the win was to the opponent's back. And all they needed was a field goal. But miraculously, it turned out okay for that player. I think it was maybe Abner Haynes with the wrong call, but I got to look that up. Don't hold me to it 100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
In 1961, NBA's Bob Cousy becomes the second player to score 15,000 points. Point guard Bob Cousy, Jack.
People forget how big Bob Cousy was. We'll talk about him later in the week, but Bob Cousy was funny. See how mobile the NBA players are today. They could shoot from any angles. They have ups. Their jump shot is so hard to block. Bob Cousy had the two-hand set shot. And I used to teach that in schools, phys ed teachers. Bob Cousy in the two-handed set shot. That's outdated today. Could you imagine a player in the NBA with the two-hand set shot, holding it by his chest and coming up with it? It wouldn't work today unless someone was ridiculously wide open.
In 1969, Kansas City outfielder Lou Piniella is voted AL Rookie of the Year. A lot of people don't. They remember him as a manager, but Lou Piniella was also a great hitter, Jack.
I won't call it great hitter. Mac, come on. You just put down Patrick Mahomes. How can you call him the greatest and you're calling Lou Piniella a great hitter? Lou Piniella is actually going to be on the ballot for the Hall of Fame. I think he's on the new ballot. As a player, no way you could put Lou Piniella in. But if you want to take into consideration his whole body of work, he had a solid career as a player, especially coming on with the Yankees, being on those championship teams. He was the manager of the Cincinnati Reds, who won the World Series in 1990, beating the Oakland Athletics. He was an outstanding manager for the Seattle Mariners. They didn't make it to the series, but one year they won 116 games, but then got bumped out of the playoffs by the Yankees. And he was successful with the Tampa Bay Rays as a manager and took the Chicago Cubs to the playoffs as a manager. So he's had a heck of a career in baseball.
Well, I say he's a great hitter because he batted around 300, Jack. If I remember, I think his lifetime average might even be a little over 300. So
no. I'll have to go, but no, not even close.
I'll look it up, Jack.
Like you said with the Lions, what a great team they won Thanksgiving. And I said I'd look it up, and I looked it up. They're playing less than 500 ball for their career in Thanksgiving, and they haven't won a Thanksgiving game since 2016. And you were gloating.
4 years ago.
Tough on
4 years ago, Jack.
The Lions are wimps on Thanksgiving, like they're wimps during every other week, just about during the NFL season. They got shut out by the Carolina Panthers 20-0, and you're bragging on the Lions?
I think the Lions have a better record in Thanksgiving than they do during the regular season, Jack. So I don't know if that's much to say.
Not saying much.
The New York Yankees catcher Thurman Munson wins AL Rookie of the Year in 1970, Jack. Another, and you're going to tell me he wasn't a good hitter either way.
Oh, he was great. Thurman Munson had the perfect manager when he came up as a rookie, Ralph Houck. Houck moved him along. He babied him. He had the perfect manager to help develop him, Ralph Houck.
I agree. In 1976, of course, O.J. Simpson's known for a lot of stuff, but he was a great running back when he played football. He ran for 273 yards versus the great Detroit Lions, Jack.
Well, when O.J. Simpson came up, he did have really a great offensive line. They were called the Electric Company. They even had a nickname.
Yeah,
So when he had the over 2,000 yards in the season, breaking the NFL record, he really had great blocking, but he was a phenomenal runner. I mean,
Reggie
no matter what you think of him off the field, you got to give him his due on the field.
Yeah, Reggie McKenzie, one of those linemen on the Electric Company. Jack.
Oh, yeah. Reggie McKenzie, great.
In 1979, Pat Summerall and John Madden broadcast a game together for the first time, and it lasted 22 years, Jack. One of the most well-known partnerships in NFL broadcasting, Jack.
A great team. I mean, and Madden obviously was an excellent coach, led the Raiders to a Super Bowl win, and Summerall was a giant field goal kicker, and he kicked a 50-yard field goal in the blizzard with the snow down the ground, the big kick once. And in those days, that was a monster kick. If any element of the NFL, the one that's improved the most of field goal kickers, they're so much better over the years.
Definitely agree with that, Jack. Because, well, field goal kicking wasn't a high priority at that time, Jack. So, yeah, I mean, I agree with you 100% on that. Sugar Ray Leonard in 1980, I remember his fight, regains the WC welterweight boxing crown when Roberto Durant says no mas, and then that was in New Orleans, Jack.
Durant never should have had the rematch when he did. When he beat Leonard the first time, he went back to Panama, was partying, and he was 40 pounds over the limit, and then he has the rematch 5 months later and could never get back in the same type of shape. He just wasn't the same fighter after beating Leonard the first time.
I totally agree with that, Jack. And, of course, you know, all great, and no taking nothing away from Roberto Durant, one of the greatest fighters, I think, of all time, in my opinion anyway. But he'll always be remembered for that no mas. And a lot of players get and any sports they get branded.
No, he'll always be remembered for the no mas. But when you talk about the greatest fighters pound for pound in history, Durant still makes a lot of people's top 10 list.
Oh, yeah.
He still has a great legacy. When you're asked to rate who is greater, Durant or Sugar Ray Leonard, they're usually neck and neck now. Because Durant really was a lightweight who moved up in weight, and Leonard started as a welterweight. So Leonard was always a little bit the naturally bigger man.
Sure.
So when you rate Durant and Leonard, it's normally very close when you talk to people.
Definitely agree with that. I mean, Durant made it all the way up to the middleweight division, Jack, and he won a title there, too.
Well, super middleweight, 168 pounds. He beat Iran Barkley for,
So, great fighter, but I still think that no mas fight. No mas fight.
It's become a culture term.
Yeah. Larry Holmes in 1983 knocks out Marvis Frazier and won for the heavyweight boxing title. Marvis Frazier, of course, was a light heavyweight. He moved up, and things didn't go too well with him.
Well, he was Joe's son. He was a heavyweight, a small heavyweight. He had no punch, and Joe tried to give him his left hook. But it wasn't hereditary-wise. It didn't work out. Marvis didn't have that good of a chin. Holmes dispatched him in one round. Marvis would later fight Mike Tyson, and Tyson took him out in something like 30 seconds. Yeah.
In the last event in interest here, Jack, we won't be able to get to the birthdays today. Maybe the most controversial baseball player in history, Jose Canseco, wins AL Rookie of the Year in 1986, Jack.
Well, we'll talk about Jose Canseco another time. He was controversial, a bit of a head case, but a lot of what he was saying was true, as it turned out. So
very true. So, Jack, that's it for today's show. Great show today. Tomorrow, our big Thanksgiving show, folks. Tune in. Starts from 8, goes to 10. We'll have our boxing expert, Iceman John Scully, and we'll also be covering all the Thanksgiving games inside and out with our two guests, Byron Williams and Keith Angle. So tune in tomorrow, folks, before you start eating your turkey, and we'll cover everything in Thanksgiving as far as football goes in the past and today. So,
And
Jack,
if you like football, you listeners, you start the day with us 8 in the morning, and we'll get you started with the 3 games. It's big football.
yes,
show
sir.
tomorrow.
So we'll see you all tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you tomorrow today. Jack, have a great day. Folks, have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow.
See ya.